This little girl's parents could not believe their eyes when they walked past the tiger enclosure with their daughter. Usually the big Bengal tigers were sleeping a reasonable distance away, but when their daughter walked past the enclosure, one tiger immediately jumped up and started to fall on their daughter. "Tiger keeps coming over. When he sees this kid," then they discover the sad reason. The colossal animal even bowed when the girl touched the window. This happened several times that day, and they could hardly hold back tears when they discovered the sad reason that morning. Mandy's parents never expected this to be such a special day, but what happened at that enclosure will change their lives. Then Susie actually packed their things that night before, as Mandy was going to the zoo for the first time in her life. The little girl loved animals so much, she had a noticeable connection with them from a very young age. For example, she always managed to calm their busy dog, and ducks in the park often surrounded her. Her parents often brought her to the petting zoo, but she had never been to a zoo before. This would be a step up from their regular animal visits. But no one expected Mandy to do the spectacular thing she did that day, because what would happen with this tiger today even made the newspaper. By now, Mandy and her parents had been walking through the zoo park for about half an hour, and the little girl was feasting her eyes and staring at all the different animals. She could not yet communicate in full sentences with her parents. But with these animals she didn't need to. It was noticeable that their daughter was enjoying herself. The little girl was pointing, staring in awe. She was waving from her stroller to every animal she passed and had a wide smile on her face. The day was fun and easy, but it would get complex soon, and neither of Mandy's parents was ready for it. Mandy was a straightforward child, for despite her enthusiasm, she remained relaxed. In her stroller, Connor and Andrea saw other parents running around after crying children and thought, "Thank goodness our daughter isn't like that." But this changed instantly when they arrived at the tiger enclosure. That was when everything changed. They quietly rolled the stroller along the glass wall, the tiger enclosure, and looked briefly at the Bengal tigers in the distance. Some of them were sleeping, others were roaming the grounds. "What wonderful animals they are, aren't they?" Connor said to his wife, who was ordering cones of ice cream from a stall about 20 meters away. Andrea nodded while she smiled. Andrea stood with her back to her husband, and daughter in her mind was not focused on the situation at the tiger enclosure, something she would soon regret. When she returned with 2 cones of ice cream and looked at the stroller, Mandy was nowhere to be seen. Connor, where is our daughter?" she asked him anxiously. In a panic, Connor and Andrea looked around. Their daughter could already walk reasonably well and was happy to show it at home, but never had done so in a strange place. "How can you lose sight of our daughter?" Andrea shouted her partner with a fiery red face, but Connor ignored her and started looking around for a sign of their adventurous daughter. Andrea immediately asked the ice cream salesman if he had seen a little girl standing out of the stroller and walking away, but he told her that he hadn't seen her leave. They kept looking around. Many people were around them, but they couldn't find Mandy anywhere until they heard the surprised voices of a group of tourists standing near them. A small group of zoo visitors stood tightly together near the right corner of the tiger enclosure, and they had a good reason for doing so. They were lined up so compactly that Connor and Andrea could hardly see through them. It wasn't easy to make out what was going on from a distance, and if it had anything to do with Mandy, but it was clear that something special was going on there, and they would soon find out what had these people happened to find their daughter. Was she there, perhaps? Andrea walked quickly to the other side of the glass wall, hoping to see her daughter there. The crowd let Andrea pass, and she found her daughter standing there on both legs and with her hands against the glassware. But Mandy wasn't alone. A giant Bengal tiger had come to the glass and followed Mandy's movements as if it were her own shadow. Mandy had clearly realized this and stepped a few steps to the left, and then she took another 3 steps to the right. And what the tiger did the same. It didn't matter what their daughter did. The considerable cat's body followed her every move like he was marrying her bystanders. Watched the spectacle in amazement, and some tried it themselves, but no one was able to catch the tiger's attention. He was focused only on little Mandy's movements. Andrew was also watching in amazement, but wanted to protect her baby girl. However, it didn't seem dangerous, and just before Andrea wanted to pick up her daughter, something magical happened. Mandy put her hands against the window and the tiger stopped pacing. He was laser-focused and about to do something amazing. He sat up on his butt and looked at the little girl intently at first, without losing eye contact. The people around them were watching in silence. Andre still wanted to grab her daughter's hand to take her back to the stroller, but now also stood and watched in amazement. The tiger closed its eyes and placed its paw against the other side of the glass, Loud shoes and "he" sounded from the people watching. Mandy and Andrea and Connor looked along in amazement at their daughter. To top it off, Mandy now also placed her head against the window. That's when the tiger did something even more impressive. The 300-pound Bengal tiger made a deep bow and purring noises from his enclosure. Tourists were taking pictures, and Connor and Andre weren't sure what to do with the situation. Mandy's parents hesitated to go on because everybody was enjoying the show. After a few minutes, they took their daughter anyway, to which the tiger made an almost crying, weeping sound. It was a special moment indeed. But as they walked away with their daughter, Connor and Andrea did not know how special this event was. But they would find out soon enough, because what Connor and Andrea didn't realize was that one man had also seen what their daughter was doing. As they walked away, he secretly started following them from a distance. Andrea, Connor, and Mandy happily continued their walk through the park. They ate their ice cream, and 2-year-old Mandy waved wildly at the animals again. It was a pleasant day with the sun shining down on them. But suddenly the hairs on the back of Connor's neck stood up, and he felt they were being watched. Connor looked around and at first saw only a busy crowd. People were looking at the animals and minding their own business. All the happy tourists seemed to be enjoying themselves. They were trying to have as fun a day as possible, but he still had a feeling that someone was looking at them. After a little while, he decided to let it go. Nothing going on. I must have imagined it, he thought. But after a few minutes, he felt they're being stared at again. He stopped his family and looked around 360 degrees among all the happy families someone was watching. This particular man couldn't seem to take his eyes off Connor and his family, and now is very noticeable. He handed out newspapers, but his attitude and gaze were not focused on park visitors. Connor told Mike Enderay about the man, but she told him he was imagining it. It was probably just a vendor from the park. After all, he was holding newspapers, but Connor didn't feel at ease. On the contrary, but Andrea tried to talk him out of it. Let's just keep walking. We're almost back at the tiger, Mandy, like so much. Connor told Andre about the man, but she told him he was imagining it. It was probably just like the vendor from the park. After all, he was holding newspapers. Tanner didn't feel at ease, on the contrary, but Andrea tried to come and bat. Let's just keep walking. We're almost back at the tiger, Mandy, like so much. The park was small, so they passed the same animal several times. And of all the animals in the park, Mandy seemed to get most excited about the Bengal tiger. They parked their stroller along the fence. Mandy's stroller straps were barely off, but she stood up and walked directly to the part of the enclosure. She stood before the Bengal was sleeping in the distance. But the moment Mandy put her small hands against the glass, the same thing that happened an hour ago happened again, when he realized Mandy was back at the enclosure. The tiger jumped up from his deep sleep and sprinted to where she was. I am happy to engage in new contact with her. He followed her and bowed deeply once more while making purring noises. Why did this animal react so intensely to their daughter anyway? To a question that would not go unanswered for long before they knew it, the mysterious man appeared again. He slowly walked towards the family. Connor quickly said to his wife, "You see, he followed us. I'm not crazy." Now Andrea believed him instantly. She pulled Mandy away from the frame and held her tightly to herself. The man now stood directly in front of Connor and Andrea. "What is going on? Why are you following us? And what do you want from us?" Connor called out loudly. He felt angry, but was also curious about what he had to say, and immediate explanation followed by the man. The man series looked disappeared. He had indeed been following them for the past hour without making any move, and he did so deliberately. He wanted to pick the right moment, and that moment was now in front of the enclosure that belonged to the Bengal tiger, who seemed to have such a special bond with their daughter. Then he started to explain himself. "I was waiting for the right moment and wanted to be absolutely sure that what happened before with your daughter and the tiger was not a one-time thing. But now I'm sure." "What do you know for sure?" Connor asked. The stranger seemed to him that the mysterious man wanted something from Mandy, and he wasn't sure what was it, money or something. The man apologized. "My name is Andrew Larson, and I own this zoo. I wanted to speak to you because your daughter did something incredible an hour ago. This tiger Kochi has been with us for 6 months. He was rescued from poachers in Nepal and was given a place here to reconnect with other tigers in a nice way. But unfortunately, Kochi is noticeably unhappy. He rarely comes off his rock and often lies isolated in the corner sleeping alone. At least until today, until he met your daughter. Kochi seemed to love Mandy and the energy she brought with her. The zoo owner noticed that fact and immediately injured his staff, had almost given up trying to cheer Kochi up. But thanks to Mandy's gift, there was hope again. Connor and Andre looked at the man questioningly. They couldn't deny that what their daughter was doing this tiger was extraordinary. But they didn't see how they could help. So what are you asking of us? And above all, what are you asking of our daughter Connor? As the man, he noticed that his voice went up but didn't care. Andrew took the family to his office, which was a short distance from the tiger enclosure. From here they could talk and quiet as well as see how the animals. They struck up a conversation while Mandy could walk around in the same room. And again she placed her hands against the window looking at the animals outside. And you can probably guess what happened next. Koshi immediately came running over to push his paws against the glass again and was ready to start playing again with Mandy. The office was adjacent to the tiger enclosure, so they could watch the interaction closely and privately. The zoo owner started talking. He had a proposal for Mandy's parents. He asked if the family would like to visit Koshi once a week, then Koshi could play with little Mandy through the glass. Since Koshi wasn't confident around tigers, Mandy could help them. In this way, the owner hoped that slowly but surely some joy and confidence would return to the big cat. Because of captivity, the tiger was more used to humans than tigers. The family received free tickets for the rest of their lives, so they could freely visit Koshi beyond set times. They looked at each other and then looked at their daughter after a brief discussion. They accepted the request, and then 1 week later the big moment was here. Would Koshi react like this again? And had she cheered up at all? Mandy and her parents walked through the zoo and briefly said hello to all the animals. But the most important animal was already waiting, and its enclosure, Tiger Koshi. Of course, Andrew the owner was also there and smilingly told them that Koshi had been much more cheerful than before. Mandy's visit had done him a tremendous amount of good, and he was curious to see what more could be done. Mandy walked over to the window, after which Koshi came running. The moment was as wonderful as the first time they saw it. Their bond was hard to describe, but everyone was happy to see him so lively. For several months these visits continued, and when Mandy could finally speak complete sentences, she told them something incredible. She had just finished her playing session with Koshi and the other tigers. When she smiled at her parents, she took her father's hand and then her mother's and began to speak. "Daddy, Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be a zookeeper and I want to be able to play with Koshi all the time." It was a beautiful and touching moment that brought tears to the eyes of Mandy's parents, and the caregivers present a calling that could not have suited their daughter better. Her gift with animals was too special to do anything. Mandy the Tiger Whisperer, she was renamed by the zoo staff, and she would not soon be forgotten, for she helped Koshi a lot. Since their first ever meeting, Mandy and Koshi had been playing regularly. Mandy helped Koshi come out of his shell, but no doubt he also meant a lot to her, maybe called Koshi her best friend, and their connection proved that fact. At a very young age, Mandy learned how important it is to be friendly and good to animals. These beautiful creatures mean so much for the diversity and beauty of our planet. That is why Mandy is also regularly invited by the zookeepers to come along and feed the other animals. She still had one favorite, whether it was feeding the elephants or seals. Koshi was her very best friend in the whole world. The two were almost inseparable, and she never got tired of returning to his enclosure. A career as a zookeeper was it for her, her goal and her dream.